live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I couldn't wait, or I can't wait for you or I to knock off LSU in the Baton Rouge Regional and for them to move. I don't even know how the College World Series works, but I can't wait to watch the Rhodey Rams smoke LSU this coming weekend.
So here's the truth, you little bastard.
Okay.
LSU is a lot of things. Bad as a baseball program is not one of them.
Overrated. They're not as scrappy as you or I is. They're just not.
Name one player on their baseball team.
That's not an important question.
Oh, okay.
It's not an important question.
LSU is the pinnacle of college baseball, just so you know. They are the Alabama.
Upsets happen. Upsets happen all the time. Random upsets happen all the time.
So, first off, it's 95 degrees with 100% humidity down here. Y'all ain't ready.
Okay, so that aspect, I will admit, is probably going to be a difficult hurdle because Rhode Island does not get that hot, nor does it get that humid. So that's probably going to kick their asses. But if there's any sport where an upset could happen like this, is baseball not one of them?
It is baseball. But can the Rhodey Rams upset DBU? And no, I'm not talking about LSU football DBs. I am talking about Dallas Baptist, who is a really, really good baseball team in and of its own. But listen, the Rhodey Rams, I'll give them this. They can swing it a little bit. So if they I'm just going to tell you, here's the thing that you miss. I asked our good friend Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. If the Rams do upset DBU and have to play LSU at night in Alex Box, you will not win. It will not happen.
All right. All right, I'll tell you. I'll hold your word for it.
Everybody that comes off in that bitch and ask them what happens. Voodoo, possums, everything comes out at night and shit starts getting weird.
Is Little Rock any good? Are they decent?
Not at all. Not
how
even.
How did they get in? What conference are they in?
So here's how crazy baseball is. You ready?
Yep.
If you win your silly little tournament, you get an automatic bid. So everything that you do in these lower conferences, okay, if you win a stupid little tournament, regardless if you kick ass during the entire regular season, none of that matters.
So even if you have a good regular season, you miss.
No, if you're like a Southland Conference, if you're in the Sun Belt sometimes, you're out. See ya.
Well, I would argue the conference tournament then in this case would act as a filter. So if somebody was overrated and had a really overrated record during the regular season and they can't stack up during the postseason during their team's tournament, then that would weed them out.
No, the problem with that is that baseball is the toughest sport in the country, outside of maybe golf. Okay. You have one bad weekend of baseball should not dictate what you've done the entire season.
What conference are they even in?
Who?
Little Rock. Oh, they're in the Ohio Valley? Really?
Yeah, they're in the Ohio Valley. Yep.
It's not a bad conference.
For baseball, it's horrendous. It's the ass cheeks of horrendous. But
hopefully
your Rams got to get past DBU to get to the pinnacle. That's all I'm saying.
That if they lose to DBU and they have to play Little Rock, I'm kind of trying to gauge here what they're dealing with.
Oh, they'll beat the dog shit out of Little Rock. All I'm saying here is this, okay? When the selection committee was coming out and Rhode Island, who won their tournament, didn't come out, I told my wife, oh, my God, they're going to put Rhode Island into the Baton Rouge Regional. I lost on the way from Georgia. By the way, stopped by Auburn. I was in Auburn, Alabama today.
Really? Is that really on the way? I don't know anything about the geography of the South.
Yes. Guess who was in the local Buc-ee's?
Who was
Hugh
there?
Freeze.
Stop. You saw Hugh Freeze at Buc-ee's?
Walks up right to us and says, hey, Blake, tell Joe to put respect on Jackson.
Oh, stop it. You're making that up. That didn't happen.
No,
stop Okay, was he actually at the Buc-ee's, though? He was actually at the Buc-ee's?
No, he was not at the Buc-ee's. But
you had me for a second.
Did stop at Auburn. Okay. And this week. I like Auburn a lot. I think it's a great little town. But nevertheless, yes, I was like, oh, my God, they're going to put Rhode Island in there. But
I will. So wait, when you tweeted me about this, I know we're here to talk about football today. When I saw that Rhodey made it, I hadn't followed them at all season long. And that was why I said I knew that this was going to happen. For some reason, it's just one of those things where I was like, why do I feel like URI is going to end up in the same region as LSU? Because they're a decent mid-level conference team that had a good, a pretty good year. it would make sense for them to get lined up with LSU. Hopefully we get to actually play you, and it doesn't end up just being a quick flipping out.
Again, say whatever you want about LSU football. Brian Kelly, do whatever you want to. You can't do it with baseball. Again, who's the best pitcher in Major League Baseball right now?
It's Paul Skeens.
Uh-huh.
I'm not dumb enough to sit here and think.
Yeah, don't listen. I will sit here and take shit for the football program. I am not taking shit for the baseball program.
So if I came in here, if LSU scheduled URI in football, you would let me come here and talk all kinds of crazy shit and say
I let you do it already.
But you would let me say that URI could beat LSU.
I literally have given you 15-minute segments about how you don't like Brian Kelly and you think he's overrated. And
but that's different. That's different than me saying a CAA football team is going to knock off LSU.
Well, because that's just not going to happen.
That's fair.
They might lose to Northern Illinois, though. Oh, wait, that's Notre Dame. Nevertheless, we are live. We do have a lot to discuss. I know that Elks in the super chat or Elks in the chat had some things, but a couple of little notes. Thank you for all of those on this great Memorial Day. We do remember all of those who laid down their lives for all of us so that Joe and I have the ability to do this. And to Julian Fleming and all of those in Liverpool, I'll be honest, I haven't really kept up with it. But Elks did send a super chat last show. We didn't get to it. I greatly apologize. I forgot about it. He wanted to use that. Thoughts and prayers to Julian Fleming and his family. That is very, very tough. So, and no, Elks, we're not getting into the argument with you in reference to the Ohio State Bama, who's been better since 2000. Joe,
I don't want to revisit it, but simply put, the first part of the conversation when we're talking about programs in any sport that are the best, titles, that automatically has as much weight as it possibly can. Any team would sell their souls to win as many national titles as Alabama has.
Okay. Listen, we got to get moving here. Greg Sankey has just made a statement through Ross Dellinger. Let us do this.
Okay.
We need to get to a quick break. So what we're talking about tonight, the SEC and Big Ten versus the NCAA. Ross Dellinger with Greg Sankey has came out with a statement. Greg Sankey on NCAA governance proposal. SEC has asked for more autonomy for the four conferences. I don't have the authority to just depart from the NCAA. I've shared with the decision-making working group that I have people in my room asking, why are we still in the NCAA? So listen, Joe, let's do this because we can get to that. That's not necessarily completely pressing, but this is starting to press a little bit here.
Yeah.
Let's come back. We'll talk about the new playoff format, Notre Dame, them getting the bye, it being removed, and then we'll come back in the SEC and the Big Ten. It does feel like that they're squaring off against the NCAA, and that's coming down the pipe, so we'll get into that as well. Cody, Dustin, and a super chat, he says, is the new college football playoff going to be like the NFL playoffs?
Well, no, because there's no straight seeding in the NFL. We're going to talk about this and break this down.
Teams.
Yeah, it's just the best teams. And I mean, if anything, the flip side of this, I feel like I know that the Lions pulled out on their push to change that rule this offseason. I feel like in the future, if maybe there's success with this for college football, that the NFL doesn't become motivated to make a similar change to straight seeding, just like college is expected to do this year.
Very much so. When we come back, Cody, we'll break down in that with an entire. We stepped away for Memorial Day for a couple of shows here, but we are back. The biggest thing, well, no, not really. The second biggest thing this week that technically has come up since we've last talked is the college football playoff format is going to be different. Everybody remembers how it was last year. Teams got automatic buys based off of who was higher ranked, and the structure was really bad. Now, the college football playoff has come up with a new solution that the top four teams will have the seeding. There's still automatic qualifiers, however, in the new college football playoff format. However, they are going to seed everybody based off of who they would be ranked as. There's no Boise State jumping, Arizona State jumping. They have changed that. Joe, I kind of freaked out when this was passed because it's the first step of being realistic here. right? Like it would have been 2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams that would have had the 4 spots, and that would have been the teams that deserved to be in there. When you look at the new college football playoff format, your thoughts?
Well, this is something that we screamed about a lot at the end of the year when the seeds were coming out, the bracket was being built. We were really frustrated with the way that it was being put together. And I think that the on-field result was very clear that the way that they had it was a mess. It was the wrong approach. I give them credit. I didn't think that they would move this quickly. Like, I'm really surprised that it has been a weird offseason for things and solutions being presented and actually enacted. I'm very shocked that this came through as quickly as it did. I want to just put into context as we talk about this, what last year's playoff would have looked like. So very quickly, 12 Clemson would have faced 5 Notre Dame, who would have saw number 4 Penn State. Number 9 Boise State would have took on number 8 Indiana, who would have faced number 1 Oregon. Number 11 ASU would have faced number 6 Ohio State. They would face the winner, or the winner of that would face number 3 Texas. And then 10 SMU would have faced 7 Tennessee. Winner would go on to play number 2 Georgia. So those top 4 seeds would have been Oregon, Texas, Georgia, and Penn State. And I think that we all could agree that bracket probably would have produced a very similar result because we ended up with very similar matchups. But those first-round games would have been a lot more entertaining. There are not a lot of bad matchups that are presented here. You know, you get the chance to Tennessee to rematch with Georgia, and they probably would have smoked SMU, but we would have gotten another week at Tennessee. Arizona State, who knows if they could have put up a little bit of a fight the way that they did against Texas, but Ohio State probably would have advanced and still faced Texas.
I know, probably.
Right. I think that the biggest piece that we can see here, if we revisited last year's bracket and changed it to the new format, all of those games are a lot more entertaining. All of the secondary games would have also been a lot more entertaining as well.
Well, it also states that for once, common sense has entered the room.
Yes.
I mean, like common sense has finally entered the room here in the sense of, Joe, 10-2 Penn State, for all the flaws that they have, is not created equal to 10-2 Arizona State. It just isn't. It like legitimately isn't. And we forgot that. 10-2 Georgia, even though they did get the bye, is not equal to what we saw from a team in Boise State in the schedule that they faced. Joe, you're talking about one team that was 80th in the country in strength of schedule versus the number 1. Both of those were created byes. Both of those teams had bye weeks. If you're Indiana and Tennessee here, you're probably saying to yourself, excuse me? What are you doing? Why didn't you do this for us? So I had to go, if I'm Tennessee, I had to go up to Columbus because of your stupid seeding and take on the national champion when I could have got a playoff game against somebody that I could have beaten, and no telling what would have happened. All I'm saying here is, for once, common sense has come into the building. Joe, listen, we have taken some, not a lot, but we've taken some heat for being a little bit too Big Ten SEC-esque. No shit we have. No shit.
We're in favor of good football. I mean.
Well, we also are understanding what those teams are going through. Right? Like, okay, Ohio State went 10-2. They played in a month a tougher schedule than anybody that got a bye outside of Georgia. Outside of Georgia. Like, what are we talking about here? Penn State was in the Big Ten title game, Joe. SMU. You're putting Boise State in a bye situation over Penn State. Do you understand how dumb that is? That is dumb. Now, Joe, I still don't agree. If you're at the table, I still don't agree with the auto qualifiers. I don't. I don't. And listen, we're gonna kind of get to that in just a minute. Greg Sankey currently is at the podium for SEC spring meetings going off. If anybody's following Ross Dellinger on Twitter right now, he's going stupid. So I'm glad for once common sense entered the room. But if you were at the table, you could have done some other things too. Joe, this is how I would equate it. I feel as if that, you know how when you're in business, they tell you don't leave money on the table, so to speak? Like if somebody's trying to send you hints saying I'll buy this too, don't walk away from the table. Why not go with the 12 best teams? Why not? Like,
okay. This is where you can't. I will not agree with you on this part. The auto bids are a fine premise. There are 12 teams that get into the playoff. We are talking about 5 designated spots in the playoff, 4 for the power conferences, 1 G5 spot that are allowed to participate. I think that because of how diverse scheduling is across the sport, that we don't get enough opportunities for teams in the Big Ten to play against the SEC or the ACC to play against the Big 12 or whatever it is to produce comparison points. Because we don't have that, we need to have some sort of an auto bid. If you win your conference, you deserve the right to go and participate. And I think that Arizona State was a good example of an unexpectedly good team. You know, a team that didn't have the same level of talent, but was well coached and scratched and clawed and fought and almost came back and won a game over a team that made it to the Final Four team.
How many years is that going to happen? Because I have a decade's worth of those exact teams being blown out.
How many years is it going to happen that the Big 12 champion and the ACC champion is like complete ass, like 3-4 losses and has no right to be there? I don't think that's going to happen.
Clemson did have 3 losses.
Didn't they finish the year with 3 losses, or did they have 3 losses?
They had 4 losses. They lost to Georgia, they lost to Louisville, and they lost to South Carolina. Their 4th loss was against Texas.
Well, that Clemson team was better than the SMU team that ended up getting in, but that was
But you understand what I'm saying?
Issue. That was a separate issue, though.
Again, hold on. This is why I'm saying it. Just stay with me. Please, just stay with me. We had a debate with two 9-3 teams at the end of the season. South Carolina and Clemson. They played on the field, and it meant nothing. But because one won a conference, we just going to throw them in there. It doesn't matter. Joe, the game was played on the field. It did. Joe, we got to a place where a game in South Carolina and Clemson happened, and it did not matter.
The mistake that they made, though, was putting SMU in that doesn't have anything to do with Clemson in my eyes. Clemson was able to go on in their conference and prove that they were the best team in their conference. And I understand, like, I don't have an argument against the fact that they went head-to-head with South Carolina and they lost. But the problem is the committee should have been smart enough to decide and say, South Carolina was better than the ACC champion. We should have pulled out SMU because SMU had done nothing to prove that they belonged. And it was that stupid logic of, we can't take a team out because they lost in their conference championship game. Or I think that's total nonsense because the conference championship game is supposed to be a proving point for teams that had easy schedules and that needed that extra week to actually define who they were.
There's 2 things with that. The problem in that logic would be, well, South Carolina lost the 2 teams that were ahead of them, Ole Miss and Bama. So again, we're trying to split hairs on something that is uneven. But my whole premise is that for once we legitimately saw a game that got played on the field and it meant nothing. They beat the ACC champion. Now, I will say this. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about what Greg Sankey and the SEC and the Big Ten fighting with the NCAA and other conferences, because Greg Sankey has just taken shots at the ACC and the Big 12 3 times in less than 10 minutes as we're currently speaking. Joe, he's not wrong.
No.
He is not wrong here. I've taken more shots at Greg Sankey than anyone. Umpiring, scheduling, all of it. He's not wrong here. You were at the table, but they're trying to communicate on how they want to do this. How about we make it all even? The best teams get in. And that was, again, and I know that we don't agree there. And look, I understand it. But I also want the game with Clemson and South Carolina to mean something. I don't think it's fair to look at South Carolina in the face and say, hey, you beat the ACC champion, but just because they're in a different conference than you, it doesn't mean anything. We're going to let them in.
My problem with your premise of just put the best teams in is most to do with it. It's not as simple as that for me. I think on paper, just that statement alone, if it was written into a rule, the 12 best teams, the 16 best teams get into the college football playoff. If that was what was written and it was just put out there, makes total sense. But we're not producing an NFL style playoff. There are not 32 teams that are vying for the opportunity to compete for a national title. Most of the G5 is not really competing, so we're going to ignore them in this conversation. There's 70 something teams amongst the power conferences that have to put together competitive schedules to prove that they're good enough. I think that the last two teams in every year for a 12 team and a 16 team playoff, maybe more than that, but at the bare minimum, the last two teams in, there's going to be question marks. There's going to be. At least winning your conference should mean something, though.
But yeah.
And get rid of the conference championships is my whole point. If it doesn't mean anything, just get rid of them.
Well, then get rid of in-season games, because per Greg Sankey, the ACC and Big 12 said that they proposed a 4-4-3-3-1 model.
That I don't agree with. That one I don't agree with. I think that's wrong.
But then if you don't agree with that, then you agree that those conferences shouldn't have 6 teams combined in a 16-team playoff.
Wait.
And no, they don't. They don't. The ACC and Big Ten do not have 6 teams that deserve to be in a 16-team playoff.
They don't. They both have 2 teams that are good enough each to throw into a 16-team playoff.
And all I am saying is, and hell, you know what? Let's fight for Illinois while we're at it. Illinois, because you use this logic all the time. Illinois beat them in a bowl game, even though let's not.
I actually don't use this logic that often. I think that I get lumped in with the general Big Ten crowd, and I'm not like a Big Ten homer or anything.
Regardless, Illinois beats South Carolina. South Carolina beats Clemson. Like, this is the whole fight that we're over. And guess what we're doing here? Guess what we're doing? Because we're trying to appease everybody based off of what happened last year, what's happening right now, even though you and I agree with what just happened. Joe, correct? Me and you agree that we're glad that last year's playoff model got changed, correct?
Yes, extremely happy.
Now we're fighting about more expansion because other teams that do not win the titles are bitching about it. That correct me if I'm wrong.
But I think that's not what it's truly about. Yes, it is. They're complaining because they want more equal representation. They don't want the SEC.
Deserve it. They don't deserve it.
But forget that for a second. The most important talking point is there's no right way to seed it. Seed's the wrong word. There's no right way to create who gets into the playoff or not. There are flaws to every argument. I think the least flawed argument is that if your team plays through their conference schedule, is good enough to get into a conference championship game and then win their conference championship game, that to me is an important point. That to me is an important point of success. When we talk about program success.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, when we talk about program success, we talk about conference championships.
Yes, we do. However, when that conference champion is getting beat by a team on the bubble in the last game of the season, it's a problem for me. And I'll always have a problem with that. We don't have to agree there. But this is not the last time that will happen. It's not. So as an example, we're bringing up Clemson. If Clemson loses to LSU and or South Carolina again this year, and either one of those teams are on the bubble, what if you're Greg Sankey, what do you say then?
Last year was a complete anomaly, though. We need to remind ourselves that it was a year in the ACC where Florida State was comically bad, and Miami would have been one of the representatives for the ACC, probably would have been in over SMU, but because they shit their pants at the end of the year, they didn't make it in. Miami would have put up a much bigger fight than what SMU did against Penn State. I stand by that. They would have put up a bigger
fight than what Clemson would have done. I would have much rather seen Cam Ward go out there and try to ball out than them.
I'm bringing that up to say that it was a historically down year for the ACC. It is not a conference that has poor branding. They have brands that are rising in the current era of college football.
Brands mean nothing when the games are played on the field and someone's getting
but that's not what I'm saying, Blake. I'm saying that in the future, there's still going to be a lot of competitive teams in the ACC. Last year, we know historically is not an example of what the ACC typically does. There are going to be at least 2 to 3 ACC teams that are worthy of the discussion. Most years, there are going to be years where conferences have down years. And I know that you would love to counter with the Big 12.
Here's the problem with your logic of what you just said. Can I tell you what it is?
What?
South Carolina beat Clemson 2 of the last 3 years.
Okay.
So you say it's an anomaly. No, it's not.
But that has nothing to do with what I was just talking about.
But yes, it is. Because again, you said that it's an anomaly because we expanded the playoff and that game didn't really matter for the team that got in.
That's not what I said.
Okay.
I'm saying that it is an anomaly that the ACC was as weak as it was. Because
Joe, who was the second best team 2 years ago when Florida State was in there? It was Louisville. Louisville had 4 losses.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't.
They played Louisville in the ACC championship game. Yes, they did.
They definitely did not.
Okay. Yes, they did, but okay. Who did they play, Joe?
They finished 10-4 in their bowl game, though. Their bowl game was the final loss that they suffered.
Who did they play?
They played USC in their bowl game. And
No. Who did Florida State play in the ACC championship game?
They played Louisville, but Louisville finished with 4 losses after
just like Clemson did. So again, you're making the argument that these teams in the ACC and Big 12 deserve what?
But that's not the 2023 was a very different year than
because you had an expanded playoff. Joe, Louisville would have been in.
But you didn't have a team as good as Florida State last year.
Who's we?
I didn't say we. You would not have had. There would not. Florida State was a 12-0 undefeated team.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not fighting over Florida State.
There was not a good enough. There was not a team that was that good in the ACC this year. My point that I'm trying to make is that the teams that are typically good in the ACC were bad last season. They were not up to standard.
A team like Louisville, just like SMU did this year. All I'm saying is it's the same logic of SMU getting into the playoff. You can't penalize a team that went into their ACC conference championship game and lost. You know, and I will bring you up the tweets of big-time media people that cover college football saying SMU should not be penalized based off of them losing a conference championship game. That was the talking point.
I don't disagree with that.
The same talking point for Louisville, who got beat by Kentucky. So, again, every time you bring up this, go look it up. I'll wait again. It's Sports Jeopardy on Ruffino and Joe show right now.
You're right. They did lose to Ray.
Yes. Again, what are we talking about? Like, there comes a premise where we keep saying that there's an anomaly going on. The fuck there is an anomaly, and I'm not saying taking this out on you.
Okay.
You know that, correct? Hold on, pause.
Yes. Continue what you're saying. Continue what you're saying.
It's not the anomaly when some of these teams in the same regions are playing one another. And let's take the conferences and the logos out of it. Let's say the ACC was doing that to the SEC. We would make the same on Jesus, God Almighty, I would make the same argument. The games are being played on the field, Joe, and teams are losing, and the conferences that are holding all of this up should not have the power that they do. We're expanding, in my humble opinion, as Greg Sankey just said in SEC spring meetings, because they don't want to come to the table and accept the deal. I mean, he's saying it, not me.
Wait, what deal? What are you talking about?
Greg Sankey says it took a while for the other conferences to come back and propose alternate models, as they did in a meeting with us last week. The Big 12 ACC combined proposed a 4-4-3-3-1 model, as Yahoo Sports reported per Ross Dellinger. Greg Sankey states, I don't think it would be me at the podium if some of those ideas were adopted. He would get fired.
Okay.
Because again, the problem is that they're trying to come together. They all have an equal vote. Tony Batiti.
Well, wait, hold on. That's not even true, though. They do not have an equal vote. The the SEC and the Big Ten, that was one of the biggest changes with the college football playoff, that it was agreed upon that they would hold the majority of the power in the decision-making. That is why that this model was completely shut down and didn't make it very far.
That sounds good. That sounds good in logic. What is playing out in reality?
They're the ones who created the 4-4-2-1 model or 2-2-1 model. And the whole point with this, Blake, that I've always been perplexed by this.
Three at large. Pause. Isn't it three at large?
4-4-2-2-1, and then there's
three at large
for the 16-team playoff.
Right. But I have said that.
That was created by the Big Ten and the SEC. What I've always been really confused by when you and I have this conversation is that what the SEC and the Big Ten have created with that model favors them. It favors them extremely heavily because they get 4 teams in, and then as we have discussed in the past, they will probably occupy most of the at-large. The ACC and the Big Ten will not occupy any of the at-large teams.
I'm saying that they should. The Big Ten and SEC should. You're saying that they don't have an equal vote. Then why don't we have the proposed model accepted? Explain to me this. If they don't have an equal vote, why are they acting like they do for the proposed model?
Because it's part of the conversation.
Ross, this is not a shot at Ross. Ross can report that, but Greg Sankey's literally saying that we're having meetings and proposing this, and we can't come to an agreement. Correct?
No, they've come to an agreement. They allowed for the other conferences to have a say.
They have a say, and they're not agreeing to it. That's the point. They're negotiating.
But if you're we all know at the end of the day, though, that it's going to end up being that 4-4-2-2-1 model because, again, the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 have no power to shut it down. They have none. They can only pitch options and ideas.
I'm glad you brought that up. And that's the topic that we're going to get to in just a moment in reference to they're about to just throw their weight around. Are they not?
Okay. Yeah.
Correct? I mean, because based off of what we're going to talk about with the SEC and Big Ten fighting the NCAA, they're done. Greg Sankey's taking a machete to the podium right now.
Yeah, this is a seminal moment. Right, and we're going to get to that. And I know that that's like a really important inflection point for the sport. I have one final point that I want to bring up with this.
Okay, let's bring it up.
My biggest problem with this whole debate that we keep having and the arguments that you're presenting.
Yes.
If we had a season where the SEC was mostly 9-3 teams, say there was only one 10-2. Yeah, say there was only one 10-2 team and the rest were 9-3 and or worse. Okay. Say most of them had worse records. Okay.
Okay.
If we had a year, say this upcoming season, where you had 11-win seasons, which this is possible. This is very possible with the scheduling now in the ACC. If you had a season where Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and let's say like North Carolina was 10-2, just throwing that out hypothetically, I'd be willing to bet on the final bracket show we would be sitting here arguing, and you would be arguing that those 11-1 seasons are not as competitive as the 9-3, 10-2 seasons in the SEC.
But you agree to that literally in the beginning of this segment. If we want to rewind the tape, these schedules are not created equally. You're right. If we rolled out a schedule like Texas, and Texas was 10-2, hold on.
Everything off of. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
If we're making the argument, and Texas had the schedule that they did, and they lost to all ranked opponents that they played, fine. Let's have the discussion. But it's also not the reality. And why not accept the 3 at-large bids then?
Wait, what do you mean? What about what does the large come into this that you're bringing that up?
Because if you have that many teams that are good and you think that you're a good conference and you're going to a 16-team playoff and there's 3 at-large, go take it. Go take it. But here's the problem with that. If that's a one-year anomaly, then it's a one-year anomaly. They've been getting their asses kicked for 2 decades.
The version of the current version of the sport is extremely different than what it was for the last 2 decades. And I think that we're not even close to understanding which teams will be the best teams in the sport.
What conferences in the NIL era have won the national titles? What two conferences?
Actually, it's been mostly the Big Ten.
No, it hasn't. Alabama, 2020.
2021 was the first year that
2020 was the first year that NIL got enacted. That July 1st of 2020. You can look that up too. Please, I'll go 3 for 3 on you today.
That one's not true. Wait.
Want to bet?
That was when the rule changed. That was when the rule was
presented. The Ed O'Bannon case went through on July 1st of 2020 during COVID. Yes, it did.
All I'm sitting here and remembering is that like Bo Nix was one of the first people to get a bunch of NIL deals.
What class was Bo Nix?
He was at. No, this isn't right. That's not right. That's not right. It was 2021. All right, we're arguing over the semantics of that. Go ahead.
Regardless, then it's 2. Okay, then it's 2 and 2. Regardless, it doesn't matter. You're right. We're fighting over semantics. It's 2 and 2.
I think that as we've seen the rise of especially brands in the ACC, that Florida State has shown that they can throw money around, that Miami has shown that they can throw money around, that Clemson is now showing that they are willing to spend money, even though that they tried not to initially. There is a capability for the ACC to produce for the top teams in the country every single year. There's a possibility for that to happen. Like, regardless of who they're playing. The problem is that they play a shit schedule because the conference is top heavy, which is fine to argue. But, like, are we going to sit here and argue that when we're putting together a bracket?
Tom, sounds good. I got the best solution to flip this segment over to Notre Dame. You ready?
Okay.
You went 0-3 against the conferences that you're arguing about. Your champion went 0 for 3. Your champion right now, I'm going to say 0-7. I think it might be 0-6 in the back of my mind. In the last 2 years, they're 0-6 against the SEC. 0-6. So, again, you keep talking about your champion. Good for you. Good for you. But, Joe, I mean, wins, why aren't wins mattering?
Wins do matter, but if a team is good enough to win their conference championship, that should matter a lot. That should matter. That should matter. That should be a significant, because there's 2 teams that get in. Clemson showed that even though they didn't have a very good record, they were still well coached enough to put up a fight against Texas. They showed that. They showed that they were able to.
Texas put up fights against everybody.
Joe, I understand that, but they still
Vanderbilt, Arizona State, Ohio State. We can't use Texas as the only anomaly.
I'm not using Texas. I'm just trying to point out that it's not a college basketball tournament. It's not a college baseball tournament where some team can get hot and play a million games.
Bids. If you win your tournament, you're in.
No. But my point is that you can't have a random team with a losing record go on a run, or like a mediocre record go on a run and get themselves into the playoff, the college football playoff. That doesn't happen.
Little Rock.
Yeah.
Hey, the Rhode Island Rams say hello.
Okay, all right. Don't disrespect the boys. You have to. It requires a lot of successful performances in order to get to a conference championship. Let's talk about Notre Dame though, because we've
yes,
too long.
Tell us what's happening with Notre Dame and them being able to be awarded the bye in the new playoff format.
Well, this is something that was not even like really like a huge focal point, but then a lot of people either were belly aching about it or Notre Dame fans were super juiced up about it. Because of this change to straight seeding, it now opens the door for Notre Dame to receive a bye if they are one of the top 4 teams in the country. They couldn't it'd be ridiculous if they created some insane rule that said only Notre Dame can't be a top 4 seed. It had to have been even for everybody, because we need to create the theoretical situation where, say, the 3 best teams are 3 Big Ten teams. One of those teams doesn't play in the Big Ten championship game. We should still send that team as one of the teams with the bye. So Notre Dame, for the short period of time until we expand to 16, are extremely happy with this outcome because they didn't have to do shit in order to get this.
Notre Dame is going to take a lot of heat for this. And I got to be honest with you. Of course, Blake's going to say this. I don't know if they shouldn't. I don't know if they shouldn't, because go ahead.
No. Finish what you're saying.
Joe, you're playing a less game than everybody, majority of the time. There's a very, very rare occurrence. Name the year, please, that 3 teams have done that. I mean, name them.
That's fair. But you can't spend the last 30 minutes arguing with me that the lack of importance for a conference championship, and just because Notre Dame doesn't play in one, they play one less game, that gets held against them.
Well, if we're talking about equality and everything's about equality, then they're getting the better end of the stick of the equality.
They are.
I mean, okay. So how do I tell every team that is actually in a conference that we're going to allow a team, because of their brand, they don't play in a conference championship game, they can be rewarded the same exact opportunities that you are when you're having to play an extra game? Because the top 4 seeds show, let's just be real, maybe you do have a rare occurrence, maybe. And I'm not saying that you're wrong, that there could be an occurrence that happened, that there's 3 Big Ten teams that are at the top, they all split, one doesn't go to a conference championship game. You're right, that could happen. My question in that is, but there are 2 of them that still had to go and play it. There are still 2. So regardless if you want to reward whatever, they're still in that conference. And you just said that if you play in a conference, you win the conference, then you should be rewarded for it. Notre Dame's literally not playing in a game. They're not. Joe, they didn't play in a conference championship game and played in one more game at the end of the year than Texas, and they still play the same amount of games. That shouldn't – you see what I'm saying? So if I'm Texas, as an example, I should be saying, well, hold up, wait a minute. Let me get this right. I got to go play, of all teams, Georgia's head ass? No, Blake, Notre Dame beat Georgia. Okay.
They did.
Well, they did. They also had another week to go and rest, too.
Well, Georgia had another week to rest, and then –
Sure. I mean, we're not going to get in the whole argument of quarterback being hurt scenario, but at the same token, we got to admit that there is a massive flaw with Notre Dame on that specific point. Now, here's the truth. The truth is if Notre Dame is that good, let's say they don't lose to Northern Illinois, you're right. They should be a top 4 seed. If they're that good, and they have shown through 12 games that they're that good. But if everything is created equally, and you got 5 11-1 teams going into that final weekend, and 4 of them have got to play, Joe, I'm sorry. You're going to have to get the shorter end of the stick there.
I think that naturally, and this is why I think that there should be a lot less of an uproar over this. I think that for Notre Dame to earn a top 4 seed, they need to be clearly one of the 4 best teams in the country. That was what my argument was originally when they were kept out of the positioning to receive a bye. I thought that they should have been in the conversation, that if they were that good, they were 12-0, they had multiple top-ranked wins, which they are aggressive in their scheduling, and more so in the near future. They're expected to play the likes of Ohio State, Alabama. I believe they're also playing Texas. They're being very aggressive. If they have wins in those circumstances in the next, for however long this is until we expanded the 16-team playoff, they earn the right to be a top 4 team and to have a top 4 seed.
Completely fine with it. But there's a lot of scenarios like we just saw play out. Are you going to penalize Texas for going in overtime with Georgia and them having another loss outside of Notre Dame and you awarding Notre Dame that spot?
I think that the committee, based on how much they've shown that they value conference championships, I don't think that they would just casually slot Notre Dame ahead of them. I don't. Unless Texas would have to be 9-3 in that circumstance, or something along those lines, or 10-3 with a loss in the SEC championship game in order for that to be created.
Fair. But again, do you penalize them for having 3 losses because they played an extra game and you didn't?
Yeah. Wait.
Again, I mean, there's justification that's going to come here from everybody. And listen, there's one thing that I do love about Notre Dame. Can I tell you what it is?
What?
They said every single time that this has come up. Sounds good.
Well, right. They never really put it. Yeah, they didn't put up a fight. No. They kind of just said that's cool with us. I would assume
that takes some balls. Hold on. Pause.
I understand they didn't have a leg to stand on. They didn't have a leg to stand on.
And they don't now. But good on them for not backing down. If there's one thing you look, you can hate Notre Dame, you can hate the tradition, you can hate their guts. It doesn't matter. They didn't back down. They didn't. Hey, we're not giving you a first round bye. You know what? Middle fingers to the sky. We don't give a shit. We'll go play wherever. You're going to give us a bye. Sounds good. We'll go play wherever. Good on them. That takes balls, bro.
Well, and I think that's why, as this is being presented and put together, why a lot of people haven't been upset by it. Because, again, I think Notre Dame understood where they stood. They're happy with the outcome that comes with it. And I think that this is a positive layer. I would assume this is something we didn't even talk about. We haven't really talked about with the expanded playoff. I would assume that the 16-team playoff is expected to be straight seeding. Even though there's no buys in that circumstance, there's still a ton of value of being the 3 seed and getting to face one of the worst teams in the field. As we've talked about, that second Big 12 team is probably going to be one of the most beatable. That G5 team is going to be one of the most beatable. Getting the chance to play one of those is going to be super valuable. And to reiterate further, Notre Dame having that positioning, I think, is truly fair if they have a season where they go 11-1 and the remaining top 4 teams are in that same conversation mix and they have the premier wins to prove that they were a top 4 team. I don't think anyone last year would have argued that Notre Dame was a top 4 team. I don't think anyone would have tried to argue it.
I think
with the NIU loss.
Well, correct. I mean, because would you kick out Penn State for Notre Dame would be my question.
No, and there was a bit of a debate for that, but no, Notre Dame didn't have the argument that could have been made for.
Correct. I mean, okay, good. I mean, correct. All I would say is good on Notre Dame, but here's the truth. Reality. It ain't no truth. It's just the reality of it. There's going to be consequences when you're not in the conference because you don't have multiple parties to fight with you. I mean, hold on.
Well, they don't have a whole lot of I mean, this is a very honest Notre Dame fan. I mean, we get a lot of benefits from not being in a conference. We make a shitload of money. We get our own TV deal.
Well, this is your consequence for not being in one. If you're fighting at the end of the year and somebody gets hit, it's your consequence. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but it's just the truth.
I think that what makes this fair, though.
Let me ask you a question as a Notre Dame fan, Notre Dame lifer. Would you rather not be in a conference and just go ahead with this consequence? Or would you rather be in a conference and then, what's the trade-off?
I still would never want to be in a conference. And I also didn't even know this. I was reading in it. People were tweeting about this week with the whole USC conversation. Apparently, Michigan's like the leading reason why Notre Dame's not in the Big Ten because they blocked multiple times in the past that they prevented Notre Dame from being a part of the mix. I don't know. I think this is like a very long time ago.
And when's the last time that y'all played Michigan? Because that's a rivalry, correct?
Early 2010s, probably. It's a good rivalry. I wish we still had it.
Well, all good things must come to an end, Joe.
Well, apparently the NCAA could be coming to an end.
There you go. You read my mind. So, Joe, before we get out of here, we got to get to this hot topic. I mean, listen, here's how I'm going to start this segment off. There's been a lot being reported as we've been live with Greg Sankey at the podium for SEC spring meetings. Go read Ross Dellinger's tweets on X to get the full recap. Joe, we don't have the time nor the capacity really to talk about every single talking point that Greg Sankey has just mentioned. We can maybe mention some. But Ross Dellinger reported this morning that the SEC and Big Ten are going to be in a fight to leave the NCAA. Now, there is one little pushback. Earlier on, before we got to this segment, Greg Sankey did come out with a statement and said, and I'm quoting here, I guess just based off of Ross, I don't have the capacity to just leave the NCAA. It's got to be unanimous. So I don't know if Ross is saying here, like they're talking about it and they want to leave, but it does sound like however, especially with the new CEO ruling in football, that football leave the NCAA. Joe, the SEC and Big Ten are about to fight to get out of the NCAA governance.
So Ross in his piece referenced that this was the quote from the piece.
Okay.
In an unreported and little-known fact, SEC presidents in March quietly authorized their commissioner Sankey to split from the NCAA if he deems that the right move. So that was why Sankey today came out to counter that. We know that Sankey talks a lot to Ross because of how often that we see that he reports quotes directly from him. It's pretty clear. That was also in line with what was brought up in Ross's piece, though, overall, that the administrators are expected to examine the governance proposal and the possibility of separating football completely out from under the NCAA. during its spring meetings last week, the Big Ten swung its support for doing just that, bifurcating football governance. I don't know how more people aren't talking about this, because this is absolutely insane. I think that what has become extremely clear, though, Blake, as you just mentioned with the College Sports Commission and a CEO overseeing it, as soon as this settlement case goes through, it is going to become abundantly clear. And there's going to be a lot of lawyers for these conferences that like read all the language and get everything sorted out after the settlement.
If they don't already have done it.
Right. Well, I think that they have. And I think that's why this is getting brought up now with the settlement coming through likely in the next few weeks, which we've been saying for months now.
For 6 months.
I think that it's going to be really freaking clear that the NCAA has no power. It has never had any power, but we have blindly followed it and allowed it to create its own power, despite a lot of the things that it has done. And it has tried to hold universities accountable for players and coaches, hold them accountable. The things that they have done has been pretty much unconstitutional. And as soon as that has been proven, the NCAA cannot do a damn thing.
Then why are they only leaving for football?
I think that they still need to rely on the NCAA for it putting on the NCAA tournament for basketball, for baseball, for all these other sports. They need a support system for the Olympic sports. But I think that they've realized that they've created their own system for football. There is no benefit to being a part of them.
How crazy is it that the NCAA could have handed out a piece of paper saying, hey, let's come to an agreement, everybody sign this, that we're going to base our governance off of these rules that y'all set, and we will enforce them. That is exactly what the College Football Commission is going to do.
Yeah.
Think about what we're saying. Joe, it's going to be a piece of paper that they signed that they all agreed to. We're agreeing that if we don't abide by these rules, we can have enforcement. Well, it's technically what they did with the NCAA, is it not?
Yes. Yes.
What's the difference now?
Well, wait. No. The difference now is that the College Sports Commission's power is backed by a settlement that is backed by the federal government giving it that power. The NCAA was acting independently and putting its own rules and imposing them, and it wasn't challenged until recently. So now there is actual government support.
Commission not independent?
No, it wouldn't be. It's being created in conjunction with the. It's being created in conjunction with the settlement.
Okay,
this
then
has
why
to be
do teams
created.
have to agree for only enforcement?
Wait, say it again.
Remember our last show, it was
Yes.
stated that, and we discussed this, that the teams have to agree with the conferences in reference to the commission's enforcement rules.
Because they don't want schools going and suing.
That also makes you independent.
Commission.
So you're having to agree.
It's not a matter of independence. It's a matter of
But schools are still having to agree. They don't have to do it.
No, they don't. But the whole premise that's being presented now is that if you don't sign this into proof of receiving punishments from the CSC, you're going to get kicked out of the SEC, the Big Ten, whatever conference that you're in. You're going to
They ain't kicking no teams out of their conferences. Rutgers, Vanderbilt, we'll see you. These other ones that make money, they ain't kicking them out. I'm sorry. Another thing, something that was also in Ross's piece, he brought up the CEO format that we just discussed, but he also brought up that you brought up the March incident. Joe, the March incident of teams in the Big Ten giving their backing and the SEC giving their backing. Joe, are we about to just be in full-on chaos for the next 6 months?
I think so. I mean, like that's kind of how I'm reading into it, unless like everything like folds very nicely. Well, we also got to remember though that a lot of the chaos happens in the offseason. I don't know if any of the chaos is really.
Can I tell you what it seems like? Well, let me tell you what it seems like to me. Tell me if you think I'm crazy or not. Greg Sankey and Tony Bertiti are trying to come up with an agreement with the Big 12 and the ACC before all of this goes down. Okay, so that they have an agreement. If they can't get into an agreement, the SEC and Big Ten are going to tell the both of them to go screw themselves. Sorry. It'll be we're going to go after it. You don't have a leg to stand on. That's how I'm reading this. Sorry, I don't know if I'm crazy, but that's what it sounds like to me. Either get on board or get the fuck off the train.
Well, and I think that what the counterpart about this that was also referenced in Ross's piece, that private equity is something that has been a quiet driving force. And then this was a blurb that was in there. The latest example was a recent clandestine call that several ACC and Big 12 school presidents and high-ranking athletic administrators held with leaders of a private equity-backed super league. The call earlier this month was had without the involvement of the ACC and Big 12 commissioners and was the second such Big 12 ACC joint meeting since December, with those from Smash Capital, a venture capital firm, proposing a super league model that features a $9 billion promise of cash infusion to college sports. So again, that was brought up in the piece. There was a quote from the Big 12, "We're going to war."
Yeah,
from a Big 12 athletic director, I believe, or president, who was the one who said
why
that.
wouldn't you put your name on that then?
Blake. None of these guys have balls to do that.
No,
not a single one has balls to do that.
I feel like that was a bluff.
Oh, yeah, he did it anonymously. Absolutely was a bluff.
Right. It's a bluff. So do you really have that? Are you trying to scare off Sankey and Petiti? That's how I read it.
I think that this whole thing is just painting that there's warring sides and this is going to bubble up and explode into something. I don't know what it is. I hope that it's not a super league. It was also referenced that the SEC is using Goldman Sachs to explore private equity involvement in the conference.
Great. Hey, let's get Goldman Sachs that blew the bubble in 2008 in the financial crisis.
Dude, this whole thing is just it's a joke that writes itself. It honestly is. It is a continuous joke that consistently writes itself.
You know what? This
Absurdity.
is the time when you could have had a commissioner and said, this is what we're doing. Either get on board or don't. And you know what? Here comes the private equity. We'll have private equity. They got to go through us to get there. So if they, Joe, as a buyer, if I want to go buy Clemson, I can go buy Clemson.
Well, I would think, I don't know, this is speculation. I would think that the College Sports Commission, with that much money funneling into a football program, would maybe have some. I would hope that they would, if they're going to be that much of hard asses and they're going to be the bureaucracy of the future of college football, I would hope that they would analyze something like that happening and that they would be able to stop something like that and say no to something like that. But that's the whole point with this. And it doesn't sound like, as we talked about on the Wednesday show, even though there's going to be a big fight put up against the College Sports Commission and the new CEO premise, that is what we need. It's what we need. That is the first step to fixing things, because otherwise it will be a free-for-all more than it's already been.
Do you remember, last thing, and I got to roll here. Do you remember the last quote in The Dark Knight? Sometimes to be the hero, you got to watch yourself become the villain.
You think it's the SEC?
No, I think it's the joint of the SEC and the Big Ten. Because here's the truth. I don't think Greg Sankey thought that he had enough capital by himself, and that's when he called Tony and said, listen, we hold all the fucking cards, but we got to agree here. We got to agree. If we don't agree, then all of this is just going to be a moot point. Right?
I think it's a fair point. It's a fair point. It's a very fair point.
The Big Ten and the SEC are playing villain right now, and I got to be honest with you. I want them to try to fight the SEC and Big Ten. Let's go see what happens.
Well, I mean,
please, ACC and Big 12, form the Super League and then see where your ratings go.
Yeah, I don't.
Are you going to stop being a Notre Dame fan? Are you going to stop watching Ohio State? Are you going to stop watching Alabama or Texas or Georgia? No. What? Are you?
Well, the whole point is that them being their own Super League, the Big 12 and the ACC, does not get them where they think it does. They need the Big 10 and the SEC. They need those brands.
Without a doubt, because no one's going to stop going to Columbus on a Saturday at noon in August when Texas is in town. It's not going to exist.
No.
All right. At least we finally agreed on something. Rhody Rams are going down in Baton Rouge this weekend. We'll see y'all on Wednesday, y'all. Good night. Peace.